If you've looked at an ag publication or listened to some cowboy poetry, you've probably heard of Baxter Black. Well, when I worked for Record Stockman and Record Horseman, we published all of his books at that time. Well, one year I got to typeset all of his books. So I helped to typeset all of the words that are in this book. And so each one of the pages with the text, I had to typeset and set it up by stanzas in the way a poet, he wanted the poetry. And so I did all the makeup on this book. And it was kind of interesting. And then one year we got to go to his Christmas party that he had at his house. He is as funny in person as he is with his poetry.
Hi y'all, I'm Brooke Carlson. I am a first year student like most of y'all, and I am from Loveland, Colorado, just on the other side of Horsetooth from campus. I am majoring in agriculture education, and I'm looking probably to be extension in the long run. I'm just going to see where life takes me, but definitely want to be an advocate for the agriculture industry. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the ag journalism industry and how it has progressed as far as the technology goes since the 1980s. I interviewed my mom, who is my expert in the field. She majored in ag journalism from CSU. She graduated in 1980 and worked for Record Stockman and Record Horseman, which was in Denver. She is going to tell you a lot about her stories and her time working there. During this video, I really wanted to show you her stories. I love listening to her stories and the things that she's gotten to experience as an ag journalist. And I just feel that I could not portray all of the cool things that she could, and only she could tell those stories to really stick true to their true value. So most of my video is going to be her telling those stories and all about the jobs that she used to do as an ag journalist. And then I'm just going to kind of follow up and connect it to the present day ag journalist. Initially, I chose my topic because I really wanted to learn more about this part of my mom's life. She was an ag journalist for about 10 years, and then she went back to be an elementary teacher. And so my whole life I've known her as an elementary teacher, and she honestly hasn't talked a whole lot about when she was a journalist. And so I wanted to just get to know more about that part of her life. And as I got into actually interviewing and talking to her, it was really interesting to hear about the technology difference, because it's just mind-blowing to me, because we weren't alive during all of this things that they had to do. And it's really cool to see the ways that you see all these old newspaper clippings, and to actually see how they were put together, and what all the work that had to go into that, and really connect it in my mind to the rest of the agriculture industry, because it's a huge part, but it also is often overlooked. Ag journalism is an important part of the ag industry because it is how farmers and ranchers can connect with others around the country and others in different industries, that different sectors that they may not be a part of, and learn about their stories and how they manage their ranches and different problems and situations that may arise, because although there are sciences and things that you can learn to be a better farmer and rancher, that is a thing. Like, you go to school for that. You don't have to, but you can. But there's a lot of things that are just, you have to deal with animals as they are, and problems that arise, and things that we haven't like encountered before. And it's really important to learn from other people's stories and experiences in order to grow your own management techniques and everything. Also, this doesn't really apply as much anymore, but when in the 1980s, a huge part of ag journalism was the market reports, which tells this week cattle prices are down 30%, or cattle prices are up 10%, or like that kind of thing, and what the average price for a pound of beef is, and I mean lamb and pork and all those things too. That's really easy to get on the internet now, but in the 1980s that wasn't a thing. Like, you needed to either call up your local auction house or subscribe to an ag journal, which, if you are an avid salesman of your cattle and pork and lambs and everything, it would be important to keep up with that on a weekly basis. So it was, ag journalism is really important to connecting different businesses, different ranchers, different sectors within the ag industry, and really analyzing and combining them in a way that makes sense to those in the industry, and sometimes those who aren't, and keeping them in a loop too. It falls within the ag value chain. Ag journalism does by, well, in the 1980s, those market reports, like, that was important to keep try to keep the prices stable, and like be aware of how the economy is playing into agriculture, because it was important that they communicate that well to the public and to other ranchers and farmers, so that they can be informed and do their part in creating a good economy in the ag industry. Also, it is connecting consumers to producers and producers to producers in a way that allows for their products to be produced in the most efficient and up-to-date way as it can be.
So as I worked for Record Stockman, Record Stockman was a livestock weekly newspaper, and it went to bed on Tuesday. So we would be gathering information, stories off of the wire. We had a wire service that ran in the back of the room, and it literally was just a little machine standing up on a stand that would go click, 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 all day long about different news stories coming in over the AP wire. We didn't have the internet then, so that's how we gathered the news to put in the newspaper. And once a day or once every couple days, Wednesday through Friday, one of us would need to go through that spindle of wire stories and pick out the ones that we thought were pertinent to our readers. And we'd rip off those, and then somebody would have to typeset them and put them onto, it was a computer, but it went on from a computer onto a disc that we would take back to our typesetting guy, and he would put it in a special computer machine that would put it onto a spindle of printer paper, which would then need to go into a developer, run through a developer machine. We also needed any photos we wanted to include in the weekly paper. Sometime between Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, we would need to take our photo and use a proportion wheel to figure out what size we wanted the picture to be. If it was starting out a 3 let's go with if it was a 5-inch photo to start with, and we wanted it to be a 7-inch photo, then we would need to shoot it at 140%. If it was a 5-inch photo and we needed it to go smaller to a 3-inch photo, then we'd shoot it at 70%. We'd put the photo down on the bottom layer of the machine. We had a screen that actually had little dots in it that would be placed over the picture. You put in your percentage, it was a digital machine, you put in your percentage that you wanted it shot at, the machine would adjust the height, it would print it onto the photo paper, which would then need to be run through the developer in the darkroom. You'd run it through the developer machine and it would shoot out on the other side of the wall where you could see it with the little dots, the pixels in it. Tuesday, when the paper went to bed, we'd take all the pieces that we had typeset during the week and get ready. Everybody would be on hand to make up the pages for the printing. My friend Kim was in charge of markets, so she would take market reports off of the AP wire spindle. She also would take some calls in from different sales markets like Centennial Livestock and other places that they would call in their sale reports. If they were closer to Monday or Tuesday, they would just call theirs in. And she would type up a page or two of the summaries of the market reports for the selected markets that we included in our paper. So on Tuesday, when we started laying out the paper, we had big drafting tables that we could just stand up at, because we'd all be working on different pages and moving around it a lot. And there would be a light shining out from underneath so you could see where you're placing the copy and that it was straight. You'd have to take your piece of paper that came out of the developer, run it through a little waxer machine so that there would be wax on the back of the paper, and then we'd use an X-Acto knife and a pica pole, a straight edge, to cut our copy into strips, and then we decide where to put them on the page layout. The ad makeup people, they would already have the ads made up, but maybe an ad just came in and they were maybe working on an ad in the back room and maybe we didn't have that yet. So we would use a blue pencil to write in that space and the paper would be measured, where that ad was going to go, and we'd write in bar JV Angus so we'd know that. Well, hopefully what they were making the specifications of the size was the size that we're leaving for that ad. Otherwise, you have to rip it up and start over again and move some things around. We had used a lot of line tape that would have either straight lines or barbed wire to do borders around the ads, or put lines to set off some different pieces of copy. So the borders could be either a thin line like a 1-point or a 2-point line, or they could be a rope border or a barbed wire border, and just using different kinds of tapes. It's just a clear piece of tape with the line on it, and you can put it down, use your X-Acto knife to cut it exactly where you want it. Where now on our computers we just do a click and we have a box or a line around something. While I worked at Record Stockman, the owners, Harry and Dan Green, they purchased a Texas livestock news, Texas Farm and Ranch News. And so we did, the middle of our paper was all the same market. We expanded with some other market reports, but the front page we remade. So we had a Texas edition and the Record Stockman edition. So we would do the outside wrap would be made up differently for specific Texas stories or specific Northern or Colorado based and Wyoming based stories. But the inside of the paper, the guts of the paper was all pretty much the same. We'd send the papers out to the printer on Tuesday evening. If the smaller edition, we might be done earlier in the day. If it was a longer edition, when we were really busy, we might be working till 6 or 7 or 8 at night, and the the printer would need to come pick up the sheets from us and take them and print them, and we'd have the papers there the next morning.
The biggest difference that I've noticed, especially through this interviewing process, is that it's between the 1980s and now, especially, there has been such a huge progression in technology, and that has made the ag journalism industry completely different, because it has gone from a trade, basically. It used to be something like you had to have the skill to for design and layout and stuff, which you still do now, but like, as my mom was talking about, she had to actually lay things out about where they should go, and had to know how to use all of the technology and the tools, like the dark room and everything. That is something that people don't need to know how to do anymore, because now it's so much easier for people to be a journalist in the comfort of their own house and their own desk at home, because you can freelance really easy as long as you know how to use Word, like word processing and everything, which is pretty common skill. Like, we learn that in elementary school now, and so almost everybody knows how to use the basic formatting on the internet, basically. And it's not also not as necessary as for farmers, because they can just look at Centennial Livestock online and see the market reports. They don't need to subscribe to something like that. So there has been kind of a downward slope in the necessity of ag journalism, although it's still important, like, to stay connected between different companies, and just be aware of like the cool stories and stuff that are in the other parts of the ag industry that you're not as connected to, in other parts of the country that you aren't as connected to. There's it's a lot easier now for journalists to make their way into the industry, because it doesn't take as much experience and knowledge and skill, I guess. It relies more heavily on the actual journaling, writing, basic grammar and everything like that. That was still necessary then. So that is definitely a commonality between journalism, because that's not going to change. Journalists need to know how to write well and capture their audience. That's never going to change. But the actual need for the labor, it's a lot more labor intensive than it is now. One person can write up their article, format it, and get it ready to be published, whereas they needed a whole staff when my mom worked there. Ag journalism is a rich history and a rich part of the ag industry, because it was really a space for farmers and ranchers to connect with one another and learn from experience and help to make each other more efficient and better producers. And it has really become a smaller sector of the industry now, because it's not as labor intensive, but it is still important, because there is a need for farmers and ranchers to stay connected. There's always going to be a need for good writing and good communication and good relation of information to consumers and producers. And it's really important that we as consumers and future agriculturalists to stay connected with the ag journals that are used right now, such as like Fence Post or Rodeo News, or different magazines or newspapers such as that, because they don't get a whole lot of support because it's overlooked. People can look at the internet and just get the information they need just quickly, but it also is still important and kind of an important skill, and it's important. It is still necessary for ag journalists to have a part in the agricultural industry, and it is crucial that we, as the young agriculturalists, support the ag journalist industry and keep it progressing so that our industry as a whole is as efficient as it can be in the future.